I'm Mono Casas, and I want to thank the Cámara Comercio de Bogotá for inviting me to be part of this initiative. Bogotá Fashion Week, of course. Cecilia Dean for accepting this invitation to share this time with me. And to Fabian Hiroshi, who is responsible for me being here and for putting all this together. So I have to tell you a little bit why all this happened. And I must say, it all started with a call from Ana Maria Londoño, who during the past few months, everybody has lost touch of each other. But Ana Maria all of a sudden showed up and told me about her involvement with the Cámara del Comercio de Bogotá and Bogotá Fashion Week. And among the things she told me, she gave me some numbers that really left me totally surprised. She told me that in Bogotá, there are 35,000 industries related to fashion, and about 350,000 employees depend on these industries. So it's a very serious economic supporter, and I think it's very interesting. I had not realized that this involves so many people. So I spoke to Ana Maria, and she brought up Fabian Hijos. I had met Fabian many years ago while I was the main provider, supplier for leather goods, handbags, accessories, and luggage for a very well-known brand in Colombia called Arturo Calle. And Fabian was this young man behind the scenes, working very diligently and always like in the background, but very professional. I had not heard of Fabian for years. I lost track of him. And all of a sudden, Ana Maria brings him up. And after that call with Ana Maria, that was followed by a call from Fabian. Well, we spent a good chunk of our call catching up with our lives, and he told me all the accomplishments he has been able to do within the international fashion business. And what struck me the most was that he told me, very humble, that he wanted to thank me for being such an inspiration for him, and that I had given him so much encouragement to go out and pursue his dreams in the international world. Well, I had no idea I had this impact in Fabian, and I was surprised, I must say honored, and I realized I was not going to be able to deny this invitation. After those words, I felt very thankful, and I thought it was a way to thank him for his beautiful words to be present today. So the next thing that happened was, okay, I accepted, and I had the liberty of choosing a theme. And after all that we've gone through, and I gave it a lot of thought, and the whole story of Fabian, of me being an inspiration for him, me without knowing, kept coming back and coming back. And I said, well, this is a good example in something that today is very important, and something that we need. And for all you viewers, I think it's a good moment to talk about inspiration. And I have the great fortune of knowing Cecilia very well. And obviously her name came to mind, and I couldn't think of anybody better to invite to share this time with me than Cecilia, who is the founder, creator, and director of Visionaire. She's a fantastic example of what inspiration can be. Her background as a recognized model exposed her to all that wonderful world of photographers, makeup artists, culture, design. And I thought that this was the best person I can invite to share this with me. So thank you, Cecilia, for being here with me from Far Rockaway in New York. And I think it's time to begin our inspiration dialogue.
Sounds good.
Okay. Cecilia, your fashion background had a strong influence on the product you created. What were the key factors that made Visionaire so unique?
I've been thinking about that, Mono. So I think, Visionaire started out as a publication. So very much, printed pages, but we have since branched out into films and experiences. But I think that ultimately, whatever we do, Visionaire is an experience. It's about having a real life experience. And I think the thing that makes it unique is that it's totally subjective. So when I was looking back at the almost 30 years that I've been doing this with my business partner, James Caliardos, I realized that there were two main factors that I based my decisions on. And I think that these are the keys to a happy creative life. So the first one is I create for myself. I do what I do for me, not for anyone else. And the other thing is, and I think this is a real key for creative people, is that you can find inspiration from everything that's around you. And I feel like those two things might sound really obvious, but I feel like a lot of people don't take themselves or their reactions seriously. They have a lot of self-doubt. And we're also living in this world that is run on market research and focus groups and data analysis. And I think for some corporations that works. Obviously Facebook makes money off of that. But I think if you're dealing with the creative industries, you can't use focus groups and market research and data analysis, because those methods presuppose existing options. And the beauty of creativity is that that option doesn't exist until you make it into being. If anything, those methods kill creativity. So I really think those are the two key factors in what makes, me happy in a creative life, but also what makes Visionaire kind of special.
Definitely. I think, what you call creative happy life is so important for creative people. If you're not a happy person, you cannot produce. And I think that that concept really summarizes the importance of having even a healthy creative life. And that for me perhaps is one of those things that today we can, that's like a new luxury to be able to afford to be able to have that in your life. So tell us, how did Visionaire start? Who were you targeting, and what triggered it? What was the motivation and the inspiration to come up with this?
Well, first and foremost, we didn't have jobs. So, so we just were going to make our own job. But I guess to be more serious, first of all, we didn't have a target audience. We had target contributors. And so we really started Visionaire as a platform for artists. And, we were coming from the fashion industry. So I knew so many fashion photographers, fashion illustrators, and they did work for magazines, but they also did incredible personal work or more experimental work that never made it into the magazines. And you have to remember, this is, Visionaire started in 1991. So that was quite a long time ago in terms of years, but it's a really long time ago in terms of the landscape in which we live. Like, this was a completely analog world. And so there was no internet yet. You know, there was no social media. Someone couldn't self-publish a book. There was no way for these incredibly talented fashion photographers and fashion illustrators to show their other work that wasn't published in a magazine. And you have to remember at that time, magazines were very commercial because they were controlled by huge corporations, which, you know, were dependent on advertisers. They all had commercial goals, which means they were quite conservative. So they weren't going to be experimental. And that's really, you know, Visionaire was born out of that. So I actually brought an example, which I hope won't be too shocking. So our third issue was called Erotica, came out in 1991. And so we asked, you know, our friends, like, you know, what is erotic to you? And so Stephen Meisel, who was a huge photographer, you know, published in all the best magazines, sends us a photo of, it's never going to get published anywhere else, and it's this. You know, and then we were also talking with Mats Gustafsson, an incredible illustrator. He actually did the type here, and he did his very first nude illustrations. He had never done that. He was always fashion illustrator and portraits. And so he did like these beautiful nudes. That's actually me. I posed for him. It was the first time he did.
It's photography.
He's an illustrator.
Oh, illustration.
Yeah, these are all
Wow.
He's just incredible. But you know, he was able to experiment with us because he knew we were going to print it nicely. He was going to be in good company, and it was a safe place for him to try something new. And no commercial magazine would have allowed either one of those artists to print any of those photos, any of those images. So that's really where Visionaire started.
Well, it's fantastic because, you know, one forgets how fast time goes by. You're talking about 1991, and you were, you know, today perhaps we take all of that you have showed us for granted. And really at that time, you came up with something that was totally unexpected. It was surprising, intriguing, creative, out of the box, sexy, disturbing, all these adjectives that made it so unique and, you know, really ahead of its time. And perhaps that's what made it so successful. But, you know, 30 years have gone by. How do you manage to still keep shocking and still keep that step ahead you always have with each of your numbers?
Well, you know, I feel like since we started in 1991, we've really evolved with the times. And, you know, we started out as a platform for artists to show their more personal and experimental work. But after a while, artists wanted to create new work for the issues that we were working on. And then after a while, we really started experimenting with different formats. And so it was almost like a challenge, you know, can you work outside of your comfort zone? And I think a good example is this issue called Scent. It's hard to see, it's all white. And you open it up and it's actually a book, and these are smells. And so in the book, you know, we're asking visual artists to do what they do, which is, you know, a beautiful visual. So here's a Mario Sorrenti, and he called this Cold. And then here, I'll do this one. This is Karl Lagerfeld did.
Wonderful.
You know, so then we're asking these artists, okay, so you've done the visual. Now, what does that visual smell like? And so that becomes a real creative challenge for them. They've never had to think about how does that image smell. And so, you know, we work with them, and then, you know, we come up with the smell, and, you know, and so for Karl Lagerfeld, hunger, it smells like bread. It smells like really buttery bread, right? So there's the bread right there. And it was right when Karl Lagerfeld had lost all that weight from his diet, so he couldn't eat bread. He wanted to smell bread. And his favorite model was Brad. So that was a naked Brad holding bread that smelled like bread. That was called the smell of hunger. You know, so it was, you know, so we start evolving into different formats and challenges. And I think for them, it makes them also think out of the box and think outside of their comfort zone. I think another thing that evolved over time was this idea of working with sponsors and working with corporate entities, not as advertisers. So we didn't answer to them, but with them, we had bigger budgets and we could do bigger productions. And so I think, you know, these two things operating simultaneously are the things that helped us, you know, stay in business and stay relevant almost 30 years later.
Fantastic. And you always start, your inspiration starts with a theme. How does that work? How does that happen?
I'd say a lot of times, yeah, we start with the theme. Sometimes we start with a format, but really we start asking ourselves, and this sort of goes back to my first point about being subjective, like we really ask ourselves, like, what do we want to explore? Who do we want to meet? I mean, I used Visionaire as my personal dating service for years. You know, there was a cute photographer. I'd come up with a theme to, you know, so I could call him. But, you know, so we come up with our themes and formats, and then that really dictates what the design is, that dictates the production, that dictates how many issues that we can produce, you know, how much we can afford, and then that dictates the retail price. So it's all, you know, very interconnected. It's not arbitrary at all. But you know, for instance, we really wanted to work with filmmakers, and it wasn't interesting for filmmakers to give us one still to be a printed page. You know, so we had to come up with an idea that would be more exciting for a filmmaker. So we did flip books. And then for another issue, we did lenticulars, and it required filmmakers to give us 3 seconds of film. So it was an issue we actually did with Van Cleef and Arpels. So this was the issue. And, you know, we were working with this fantastic filmmaker named Mark Romanek. And so he was able to do a lenticular. I don't know if you can see that.
Yes, we can see it. Okay.
You know, in lenticulars, like, they've been around forever. Like, you see like tacky postcards, like with, you know, a girl winking at you. But, you know, we're working with like, you know, Mark Romanek and Jones and Pedro Almodovar and Sofia Coppola on these lenticulars. So it sort of takes it into a whole different realm. You know, when we wanted to work with musicians, we came up with an issue that was all 12-inch vinyl records. So it really comes down to like what we want to learn about and who we want to meet and what we want to explore. The issue out now actually is very relevant. It's called Now. And it actually comes like this. And it happened because, you know, for a while now, especially in the States, we've all been going to a lot of protests and marches and rallies. And every time I would realize like, oh, I forgot a sign again. And I was like, we should just do an issue of Visionaire with artists making signs to hold up at protests. And so what we did was we printed it on canvas.
Ah.
Right? So here it is. We print it on canvas so that it's malleable. You can like put it in your purse, but then it's like not ruined and you could still use it. And so that one says resist. Then we had, oh, see, your dog's like that one. Vote.
Yeah, vote.
Yeah.
Making you vote.
And this was by Nan Golden. It has to do with the opioid epidemic that's going on in the States. You know, so this is like very relevant, but also totally personal. Like I personally needed posters, and then we made them available. You know, obviously it comes in an edition, which is very expensive, but then we also made them available for free as free downloads. So anybody could download it and have their very own Marilyn Minter poster for a march. That was really fun.
Well, that was great timing, especially for the times that we're all living all over the world. And really it's, creativity has no limits. And I find that your product manages to hit at the right time, at the right people, at the right moment. And that's so important, especially when you see that institutions, I feel that institutions that endorse like designers or artists, they are so, they think they find a way, a formula to make something work. And so, you know, you have to belong to these institutions. But at the same time, what you just mentioned a little while ago, you know, like it cuts creativity, because if you were trying to fit into something with that product, you wouldn't have fit anywhere. And in that, the fact that you were so unique opened a whole dimension, and that is fantastic. And you come up with great ideas, and great ideas generate great results. Has it always been like that? Have your clients always been what you're expecting?
You know, arts, no, obviously sometimes it's not easy. I mean, none of it's ever easy. So, you know, the reason why I really strongly believe that we have no competition. And honestly, the reason why is because it is so freaking difficult what we do. And I think some sponsors don't realize how difficult and ambitious these cute little projects are. And, you know, there have been a couple issues. I mean, I think if you looked at our collection, you wouldn't know which issues I was talking about. But to me, I feel like I failed them a little bit because we started with the sponsor, and that's always difficult. And the way I always imagine it is we're always working sort of on multiple fronts. So it's almost like puzzle pieces. And so some of the puzzle pieces are formats, or this is an artist we want to work with, or this is a community we want to reach, or this is a theme we want to explore, this is a company we want to work with as a sponsor. And then something will come up and it will bring multiple pieces together. And then it's like, okay, that's the issue. It's ready to go. And on a couple of occasions, we started an issue without having all the puzzle pieces together. So we're working with like the sponsor piece without having in parallel worked on the creative aspect of it. And it just makes it a little bit more challenging, but you know, I do believe in this idea that you can find a nugget of something that you can explore and get excited about and do something amazing with. And it really goes back to this idea of being inspired by what is around you. And I think that's a really key thing. I mean, Mono, I'm sure you've been in a situation where you've been doing work that maybe is not exactly what you want to be doing, or you're struggling a little bit about how to make it you, even though the brief isn't you.
You know, projects become like children. Well, I don't have children. You don't have children either. But I guess it's the same feeling of having a child. You know, like you get so excited with the whole concept of the new client and the ideas, and everything starts to flow, and you start overlooking a lot of things out of the excitement, and you don't do the due diligence of really asking the right questions and going a little bit beyond the facade of that client. And sometimes you make mistakes on saying yes, 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 and then it makes projects miserable, and that's awful. That kills all the happy creativity that you mentioned before. And but what I have learned is that, and in all those situations, in the back of my mind, there was a little alarm going, attention, alert, 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 alert. But I was so excited about it, I guess, that I failed to hear it, to recognize it. And so you have to start trusting your instincts and hearing the back of your mind, because your subconscious is always right. And today, perhaps after many years, it's easy to say this, but I keep making mistakes even now. You know, I think it's part of the process, and you learn. You know, as miserable as it can be, you have to focus, because something positive probably came out of that, and that's very important. That already is a big part of growing up and learning and knowledge and experience. And another thing that is very important, Cecilia, I think, today, and is that we have been brought up with the fear of failure. And that fear of failure perhaps doesn't let you go to many projects that you would perhaps flourish and come up with something fantastic. I'm sure that at the moment you came out with Visionaire, there was some fear, but you were so convinced and so sure of it that that's what made it happen.
I absolutely agree with you. I think a lot of people have so much self-doubt, and I hope that the big takeaway from the conversation for anybody who's watching it is to trust their instincts. Because like you said, you have reactions, you have gut reactions. And, the reason why we go to school or educate ourselves is to understand those gut reactions, analyze them, process them, and then be able to move forward with more knowledge. I think that's a really key, but also this idea of being inspired with everything that's around you. I would be very curious to know from you, Mono, like, is there something like mundane that inspires you?
Well, actually, yes, and I can think immediately what comes to mind is one of those experiences that the client didn't turn out what it should be, and in the mundane inspiration. We were hired to do a wedding in Cartagena and be like the artistic directors with the whole concept. for this big wedding in Cartagena. And as you know, Cartagena is Latino, and it's music and happy and beachy and hot and sexy. And this woman, the client, came to tell us that when I asked her, how did she imagine this event? She went into this story about Hollywood, about the 1930s, glamour, the Oscars. And, you know, like we were total opposites in all our aesthetic values. There was absolutely no connection whatsoever. She was all about bling bling, and that's like very far from us. So out of desperation, out of not knowing what to propose, I told her, why don't we think of something that's not so obvious? Instead of what's happening around the city on top of the land, we're near the ocean, we're in Cartagena. Why don't we go and explore the deep sea, the underneath world? Blank. She wouldn't understand anything. She just stared at me like blank. She wanted Hollywood and bling bling, and I wasn't getting through. And all of a sudden, I mentioned The Little Mermaid. And this client went like, what? The Little Mermaid? She was my idol when I was growing up. She was I loved the Little Mermaid. Oh, of course, yes, yes. Well, we were not gonna do The Little Mermaid exactly, but I got her to visualize that the whole inspiration for all the events would be the bottom of the sea, the corals, the anemones, the movement of the water, the colors, and actually the bubbles, the sound of the sea. It turned out to be magical, really special. It was so special that even the mother of the bride, really got into it, and she ended up showing up wearing something that made her look exactly like Ursula. And if you've seen the movie The Little Mermaid, you know what I mean in every sense. So that was a mundane inspiration with a successful result. And but Cecilia, you talk about subjective, about personal experience. Can you really be inspired by the banal?
I think that you have to be, because if you're not, your life will be very difficult. And it reminds me of an issue that we did recently with the late great John Locke. We were brainstorming with him to do an issue where we were going to, use his color shapes on photography, and we were trying to figure out what the photography should be. And he said, "Oh, I think it should be selfies." And I was like, "Oh my God!" Like, I have such disdain for selfie culture. And I was like, now I'm going to have to embrace this medium that I have such disdain for. On the other hand, I was like, oh, well, this is going to be really easy because everybody takes selfies and I only need to get 30 selfies. It's going to be like super easy. And it actually turned out to be an incredibly difficult issue to put together, to get selfies from people. And, ultimately we did it, and it's a fantastic issue. But one of our contributors, the model Carly Kloss, explained it to me afterwards, because I was like, I don't understand why this was so difficult. Like, you're posting, on Instagram all the time. Like, everyone is constantly posting Instagram selfies. Like, why was it so hard for me to get a selfie? And she said, because if you're just doing a selfie on your Instagram feed, after a couple hours, it's going to disappear because there's going to be a deluge of like more content. But the moment it's going to get printed and then it becomes a physical object, and then it's going to become an artwork because John Baldessari is going to put, you know, his color shapes onto it, and then it's in an edition in Visionaire, and then that's going to be in a collection, and that's going to be in institutions and in people's collections. Like, it becomes immortal. And then now you have to really think, like, do I want that selfie to be the selfie that lasts? And I just thought that was so interesting. And I brought her selfie. This is the selfie. So these are the John Baldessari, and this is another one by Miley Cyrus. Miley Cyrus did one. It was in this issue. You know, and so I thought that, you know, talk about something banal, a selfie, talk about something I really had no interest in, but embracing it, right? You're going to embrace it. And then I learned from it, and it was a really fantastic learning experience, and it was just absolutely fascinating. And I think that it reminded me of something else. I was at a workshop. I did a workshop at the White House under Michelle Obama. And it was a fashion workshop for hundreds of high school students from all over the country. And they set up a panel discussion with some fashion designers, and someone in the audience asked a fashion designer who will remain nameless, like, where do you find your inspiration? You know, everybody always asks that question. And he said, like, oh, you know, I love taking, like, you know, exotic trips to, like, India and Thailand. And I was so annoyed at that stupid answer. And I just thought that was so mean to, like, tell a bunch of high school students who don't have the opportunity to take these fancy exotic trips. And I was like, on top of it, anybody could take a trip to India or Thailand and be inspired. Like, that's just not difficult. They're incredible countries. They're full of beauty. That's not the key. The key is, can you find inspiration in your kitchen? Can you find inspiration all around you? And especially now, it's like we're sheltering in place. We're under lockdown. Like, we can't travel the world the way we used to. So what do? If you can't find nuggets of content and wonderment in everything around you, you're absolutely screwed. So I think that is the key. I think finding inspiration in everything around you, in the stuff that's the most banal, even stuff that you don't even like, that is your key. If you can do that, you will have a happy, creative life. Don't you think, Mono?
Totally.
And so, I'm curious, Mono, tell me.
Well, yes, you know, like, I think I've been very... Sorry?
Well, I'm curious to know what is on the horizon for you, what you're doing.
Okay. Well, you know what? I think we've been blessed with this opportunity of this lockdown and all of this. And in my case, it's been a fantastic moment for rethinking, reprogramming, evaluating, making a list. You know, many times it's easier to make lists of things you don't want to without knowing what you really want. Because I think along the way, you'll find what you want. But I made a list of things that I don't want to fall back to. And I want this whole period that has been, you know, there was a moment of anger, bewilderment, panic, and eventually I started to get over all of that. And I was lucky enough to have go into a reaction mode and to, like, reset myself, reset my mind. So I have wonderful things in in my mind, and we have this wonderful place called Maison, where we invite people to come and partner with us in great ideas that involve art, fashion, food, music, whatever it is. You're welcome to come here, and we put teams together and come out with these great ideas. And I think that I consider it has been a very fortunate for me, and I think for our whole generation, because I don't think this will ever, I hope not, will ever, people will not have this opportunity again. You know, like I'm gonna be 60 and I'm still dreaming and I still have plans and I want to do things and I feel I haven't done nothing. And there's so much to do and so many people to meet and so many wonderful things to do. And that is what makes me creative, happy. And so that's basically where we are right now. I'm very fortunate to have Maria along with me, and we are a fantastic team. And this is also an invitation for all these young people that are involved in the fashion world. And my new thing is, fashion is not only the clothing you wear. Fashion will always be with you. That knowledge and skill that you have acquired with the experiences or all your academic background will always be with you. You just have to take it to new levels. Like in your case, you took it to the level of visionaire. And that just is a tickle in your mind to think that when I gave you those numbers at the beginning of our talk, you know, like there's 35,000 industries related, making shoes, handbags, pants, shirts, blouses, you know, like everything we wear, but fashion is much more than that. In fashion, if you have that fashion background, you have so much that you can apply it to, because everybody wants to be fashionable. And then another thing that came to mind is that anybody today can be fashionable, but style is something that sets you apart. And not everybody has that. And we have to work on that. In the new lifestyle, as the word says, it's about style. And so we encourage all these people, young people in the fashion business, to come and explore and take challenges, and don't be so worried about whether this is going to be accepted or not. There's so much, the doors are open, and right now there's no fear of failure, because at least if you fail, you tried something and you can say this did not work, but it will open many other doors. What about you? What are your, how's your horizon looking?
You know, a lot of things got postponed or canceled, but the new venture that I'm extremely excited about is China, and we actually opened. We formed a joint venture in China, so I have an office and a space and a staff in Shanghai. I am supposed to be there, and obviously I can't be there, so that's been challenging. But you know, we're bringing experiences, you know, our publications, working with artists, doing merchandise, we're doing manufacturing. I mean, it's very exciting, and it's like a whole new world, and it's all these new possibilities, but it's really just working on, it's building on everything that I have been working on already. I loved everything also that you just said, Mono, about no fear of failure, and this is a moment to recalibrate. And I do hope that everybody listens to that, and this idea of of subjectivity and people really getting in touch with themselves, understanding their gut reactions, understanding what they love and why to pursue it. I think that's just so key these days. You know, I'm half Chinese, so doing something in China has always been in the back of my mind. So we started this project a year before the pandemic hit. But it was a gut reaction. It was like purely, and then I was like, okay, what is this gut reaction about? And then it's like you go back, you analyze it, you process it, and then you can make the steps to move forward. And that's what our education is about. It's giving us the tools to analyze these gut reactions and to make them work for us. But then you have to trust yourself. And you know, creativity is all about being subjective. It's your very subjective point of view. It's how you see the world, which is different from how everyone else on the planet sees the world. And you have to like own that and celebrate it and want to broadcast that. And if there's other people who like it, that's great. And if there isn't, that's okay, because you've done it for yourself, at least. You know, obviously we're both in very privileged positions. We're, you know, older, we've had our careers, you know, we're somewhat established. And I do think like this pandemic has given us the opportunity to get off the hamster wheel and to recalibrate. But for all the young people out there, this is an incredible moment of experimentation and to just think of the world in a different way. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how we come out on the other end of this, don't you think?
Well, you're always a step ahead, and you know, especially here in Colombia, we are always hearing about China coming to us, and now to change that direction makes all the sense in the world. So that's so interesting, and taking Visionaire to China is definitely thinking out of the box and challenging, and I'm sure you're having a lot of hardships in putting it all together, but I'm sure it's going to be an excellent, it will have an excellent result, and congratulations for that. Well, Cecilia, I think we're a little bit running out of time, and thank you for sharing your time with us. And how would you like to close this inspiration dialogue?
I think that I want to reiterate the 2 points I made at the very beginning, which were, you know, and it's these points that I've been coming back to over and over, is to trust your instincts. And I know that just sounds so, you know, contrived, like trust yourself, but there is something to that in the creative industries. And to find inspiration from everything that is around you. There is inspiration in the most banal. And if you can do that, you will just have a beautiful, happy, and successful creative life. And that's what I hope for everybody who wants to be in the creative industries.
Fantastic. It's like, look for your little mermaids out there, because there's always an opportunity. And thank you very much. I think we're trying to, the purpose of all of this dialogue and is to make people think, people who are related to the fashion industry, that your skill, your knowledge can be applied to so many other things besides garments. There's a lot of that out there. So it's an opportunity, and the moment has come to get inspired and come up with fantastic new ideas that I'm sure the world will receive and you will be a successful designer, being able to have a happy, creative life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mono. It's been so nice to be here with you.
Likewise.